First off, I want to apologize for the delay between uploads. If I'm being honest, this was my second time watching The Taming of Rebecca, and I didn't enjoy it the first time. That made it even more difficult to watch the second time, especially because I actually needed to pay attention this time. The reviews should be coming out at a faster rate now, however, I'm in the process of moving back to school, so no promises on that. As I stated in the community tab, the next review will be on the Human Centipede 1 and 2. The Taming of Rebecca is a 1982 roughie about a woman named Rebecca who suffers sexual abuse at the hands of her father. Following this, she runs to a school for rebellious teenagers that is run by an even crazier and more abusive administration. Anyone familiar with colleges might be able to relate to crazy and abusive administrations. For those unfamiliar, roughie is a genre of porn which gained prominence in the 1960s and 70s. These films feature graphic violence perpetrated against women. Other examples of roughies are water power, forced entry, and hard gore. The movie features graphic depictions of abuse on young teenagers at the hands of an authority figure that is supposed to be their guardian. This was director Phil Prince's first public debut, as he previously used aliases when publishing his films. Sadly, it wasn't his last directorial outing. To me personally, the movie feels like a cash grab. The plot is incoherent, the dialogue is monotonous, and the sex scenes are absolutely nothing to write home about. Personally, I didn't find the movie that upsetting. For the most part, I was bored and barely paid attention upon first viewing. While the movie wasn't disturbing, it was gross, but that mainly comes from the low quality of the film mixed with how much they decided to magnify the sounds of the sex scenes. To put it bluntly, the movie wasn't sexy, to me at least. The constant close-ups, loud, over-exaggerated noises, and how weirdly wet all of them were during the sex scenes, and I don't mean in a sexual sense, I mean that they were literally wet, made things almost off-putting. And even for a porn movie, some of the sex scenes felt really forced or at minimum rushed into. The very first scene in the movie is a title card interlaced with scenes to come, making it one of the only films I've ever seen that has a trailer for the movie before it starts. Once the film officially starts, we're introduced to Rebecca as she leaves her house and calls a woman at the academy, presumably the admissions counselor. Rebecca informs the woman that she has been sexually assaulted by her father and is told that she can seek refuge at the school. Since Rebecca is in a vulnerable state, she assumes that things will be okay there and naively ends up at the school, hoping to escape her father. Upon arriving, Rebecca is told that there's a new dean of discipline in the school who's working to take care of the students. She's then asked by the admissions counselor to recount the tale of her sexual abuse. The scene starts with Rebecca's father calling her into the bathroom and forcing her to give him a blowjob. It quickly escalates to sex. While recounting the actions, Rebecca is clearly upset. However, she doesn't seem to be under duress in the scene, outside of saying ow a few times. To be honest, it seemed as though she enjoyed herself. However, her dad was clearly in control for the whole scene and would frequently berate her. The entire molestation scene lasts about 11 minutes. The first half of the scene is relatively tame, however, in the latter half of the scene, Rebecca is violently spanked and forced to go outside of her comfort zone by her father while she cries in pain. She's then forced to piss on her father, which was easily one of the most out-of-place scenes in the entire movie. It felt more in character for the father to pee on Rebecca, as being pissed on is usually a submissive activity in the same way that pissing on someone is a dominant activity. The scene was either trying to convey the power dynamic that the father has so much control over Rebecca that he can force her to pee, or it was just put in because Phil Prince wanted to see Sharon Mitchell, the actress playing Rebecca, pee. Personally, I think it was the latter, as I doubt that Phil Prince put that much thought into the movie. Rebecca's then introduced to the other kids at the school, who are all almost indistinguishable from each other. This is partially due to the similar hairstyles and facial features, as well as being because of the terrible quality. I genuinely can't overstate how bad the quality of this movie is. I watched it on X Hamster or something like that, as that was the easiest way to find it, and I'm not going to go out of my way to buy this movie since I already knew I didn't like it, but I can't imagine that the quality on the DVD copy is that much better. The dean is promptly introduced, and in typical evil dean fashion, he immediately yells at the students and tells Rebecca to come to his office after his meeting. This meeting is with a student or worker named Linda and basically just results in the dean getting a blowjob for a few minutes before fucking Linda in his office. The next scene shows three girls, one of them being Rebecca, discussing the cave, a mysterious place where the dean takes girls from the school to tie them up. Rebecca, being new, obviously doesn't believe this is a real thing. So the other two girls call the boys in to convince her that the cave is real. And I shit you not even 3 sentences after discussing the caves, one of the guys says verbatim, "Enough of this talk about the cave. Let's get down to some serious action." There's then a massive orgy involving all the students. There's not really much point in describing it, honestly, so I won't. Mid-orgy, the scene cuts to the admissions counselor and the dean talking about the new students, Sandra and Rebecca, who are described as wild. Rebecca, in particular, is described as being in need of discipline. The only notable scene in the orgy comes after this conversation, where a woman is getting vaginally fisted. I couldn't quite tell if she was enjoying it, but she looked to be in pain. The dean then interrupts the orgy and forces two of the students into his office, one of them being Rebecca. He obviously takes special interest in disciplining Rebecca, forcing her to lift her skirt up while being bent over so he can beat her with a paddle. The dean then further punishes Rebecca's sexual deviance by raping her in a feat of mental gymnastics that Simone Biles would be proud of. Next comes the most infamous scene in the movie, the safety pin scene. Following Rebecca's rape by the dean calls Sandra and one of the other boys into his office and forces the boy to undress Sandra and stick a safety pin through her nipple. What's worse is the pin wasn't even properly sterilized, meaning that not only is Sandra humiliated, she needs to get a tetanus shot. Sandra is in so much pain that she ends up peeing herself, causing the urine to get on the floor since she's naked. The dean then yells at her as she runs out of his office. A woman finds Sandra and offers to help clean her up, but just takes her to the cave and forces her to have sex with her. The dean interrupts the two and yells at Sandra for stealing the safety pin. He then rapes her. And mid-rape, he calls Sandra the wrong name, which is one of the funniest parts in the movie, because you can tell that George Payne just genuinely forgot that the character's name was Sandra and not Sonia. The movie cuts to Rebecca yelling a bunch of incoherent mumbo-jumbo to the admissions counselor, and they then go down to the cave to stop the rape of Sandra. The admissions counselor puts a gun to the dean's head, and he starts laughing. The movie promptly ends. On a technical level, the film lacks severely. Many of the sex scenes feature really gross close-ups that debatably make them even less titillating to the viewer. The little amount of music present in the movie is usually stolen and undercuts what's happening in the scene. Each sex scene in the movie is excruciatingly long, and the dialogue in each of those scenes is repetitive and boring. It genuinely sounds like a broken record. Much of the film doesn't even make sense. For example, the students claim that the dean is new, but then they mention that the cave has been there for 3 years, and they don't clarify anything by saying that each dean can use the cave, or that maybe he was just recently made the dean of admissions. This could have easily been fixed by having them actually explain what the cave is and not just cutting to an orgy 3 sentences after talking about the cave. Also, for a film called The Taming of Rebecca, there aren't many scenes of Rebecca being tamed. In fact, the most violent act of the movie is centered around Sandra. The film, if you can call it that, is not entertaining, it's not disturbing, and it's not titillating. For a disturbing rating, out of 10, I would give it a 2. As a film, I would give it a 1.